Hello my fellow presenters. Okay, in this video I want to explain how as a freelancer, how by actually you taking on more work and being well intentioned, that can actually end up in you losing money that's irrecoverable, and you can't get it back. And actually a lot of people don't realize that they fall into this trap. They don't understand the loopholes that are around and actually why this exists. Also in this video, I will be explaining how this impacted me and also how I implemented a solution so that me and my fellow colleagues could avoid this problem and make this actually work to our advantage. And I'm going to encourage you to make it work for you as well in your situation too. So watch to the end of the video. So allow me to explain. Say you might be somebody working in London as a theatre director, or you might be in a completely different industry. Maybe you're a plumber, whatever it is. Although I say that if you're a plumber, you're unlikely to be short of work, to my understanding. Anyway, you might be a theatre director and then suddenly you have a real quiet drought. So you might end up taking on more work, and it might be with an agency and you might be temping. Or you might be working in schools, which is something that I did when I first moved back to London, and I used to do that as a filler. And predominantly, the work that you do, your main practice, your main freelance pursuit is self-employed. But when you take on extra work in these other capacities, most of the time that's PAYE. So you end up ramping up work in PAYE, which is a bit of a nuisance, but that's just the system that you have to go by. Now, the implication of that can actually mean that you end up paying two lots of tax, and that actually unfairly works against you. So this actually refers to national insurance. So if you're self-employed, you pay national insurance on a cumulative basis when your earnings are more than £12,570 a year. And that's cumulative. Once you've filed your tax returns, you've added everything up, you've added all your expenses or deducted all your expenses, and then you pay national insurance on your self-employed earnings on that amount. But when it comes to PAYE work, the difference here is that you pay national insurance. Technically, it should be on any earnings above £1,048 a month. That should be what it is. But what always happens is that they look at your payroll sheet as though you're getting that across the whole of the year, even though you may not be. Like, for example, me, when I would work in the schools, if I would do more than 1 day a week, I would suddenly start to get national insurance creep in, and it would go up exponentially higher when I would do a third day. So that's what would happen there, whereas it wouldn't be the case if I was doing self-employed work. So they just imagine that you are doing that all the time, and a lot of people don't realize that. So the limit there is £1,048. That's for this tax year, and it's been frozen. Something I will commend actually the Conservative government on, and it's very rare that you will hear me ever doing that, given the shambles that they were, is the fact that they were brave enough to cut national insurance, because actually that's one of the most unjust policies I think that we have. The intention was that it's supposed to help give you a full state pension, but really it is a form of income tax, and it should just be made payable to all, including the pensioners. And actually the way that it steeply goes up for middle income earners, and then drastically drops when you earn something over, I think it's like £52,000 a year, something like that, to down 2%. That's, I think, really unjust as well. So it should just be more consistent. So hopefully that makes sense, and I'm going to explain that with an example article here, which I think really, it was hard to really find something which really explained the situation well. And there was a question and answer submitted in an article in the Scotsman, which I'm going to read out the main crux of it for you. So a chap emailed and said, I have been on a 0 hours contract since 2014, but earn the majority of my income over the summer months. And he said, I am paid via pay as you earn on a monthly basis with national insurance contributions deducted, and it is the monthly threshold that it is applied each month, irrespective of how much I earn per year. The result is that because my contributions are deducted monthly, when my earnings are not the same each month, the total paid in contributions is far higher than 12% of my annual earnings above the annual threshold. At the time it was 12%, but now it's actually gone down to 8%. Does HM Revenue and Customs owe me money, he asks. Why is it taking more than it should? And the answer was this. On paper, this does seem to be unjust. You sent me evidence of your earnings and I can see why you're challenging it. Last year, paying 12%, so this would be for 2019, paying 12% over the annual earnings threshold for national insurance would have meant paying almost £120. Instead, you ended up paying £460, 45% of the amount of earnings liable to national insurance. He spoke to HMRC about the query and shared the information about his earnings over the past 3 years, and he said that he's afraid that the news that he would not be able to secure a refund and that he has not overpaid contributions. This is because national insurance, unlike income tax, is deducted on a non-cumulative, non-aggregated basis. Rather than basing the calculation of your national insurance over the course of a year, which is what we do with self-employment, the amount you pay depends on the frequency of your pay periods and the level of your earnings in each of those periods. So in this case, it's monthly. Now, the reason I came across this, and I'm going to be giving you potential solutions to this as well, and actually explain why that this can actually work in your favour. Okay, so as mentioned, this actually happened to me. So I work a lot in the education sector and I teach at a university, and we are made to be on PAYE contracts, which is really annoying because most of the talent pool, the associate talent pool, who get a sporadic few dates across the year, are all predominantly self-employed, and we have to do other things as well to supplement our income. And so we're on 0 hours contracts. But what actually would happen, and by the way, I'm not going to mention the university because it's not about naming and shaming them. This is something that's endemic across the country. In fact, my brother-in-law's mother has experienced the same thing as well at her university in the north. Anyways, so we had our pay, what would happen, we would have our dates of our pay clumped together over months because they kept delaying the pay for months, and the impact of that is we would have a few £1,000s worth of pay, and lots of that pay would then be subject to 10% national insurance because that's what it was in the previous tax year. It's now 8%. So anything above £1,048 a month, the threshold is the same because our payroll is assessed monthly, so it always goes by when your pay is processed. So HMRC treat that as though we're getting that every month, even though we're not. We go for months, particularly the summer months where we don't teach at all because people are on holidays. So we don't get to use our allowance of £1,048 a month we don't get to use that at all. And so I kind of organised a meeting where I said, look, can we implement a timesheet process? Because I remember this exists at another university that I did some work for, and this is kind of commonplace in a lot of other industries, like when I used to do promo. So that's something where we can then choose when we submit our work for payroll, and we can look at the amount of pay that we want to submit, and we can hold some of the dates back. Now, obviously, there is a con here in that you're not going to be getting your pay always on a timely basis by trying to keep under the limits. But when you think about what you get in the bank in terms of interest and the charges and so forth, this for me is a very worthwhile option. And actually, in this case, it meant that by submitting our timesheets, we actually got paid quicker because it didn't have to go through all of these departments like finance to payroll, so forth, which would just take long. Right, so that's one of the things that really worked for us. And not only that, it meant that we could not only earn the up to the limit with national insurance and then on our self-employed work, and then just pay anything we owe over the top of that on our self-employed income, but we can actually now enjoy another kind of national insurance tax-free allowance by being on PAYE income. Obviously, this is not financial advice. This is just information, giving you my kind of anecdotal experience. But this is something that hopefully you now can take to the work that you do and say, well, look, can we have a timesheet system? Or you might now decide, actually, rather than me ramp up the dates working in this line of work, it actually might be more worthwhile if you do a different type of work that's available to you. Or you might end up pursuing a project that you might do. I remember thinking, what was the point of me working more than 1 or 2 days in the school when I could get on more with my creative projects, take those classes in theatre, do that project, try to write my quizzes, try to really focus my time on other things, because actually I had to manage my costs, and essentially I was throwing money away by just doing more of that particular type of work. So hopefully this can actually empower you to be really aware and decide, right, what are you going to do with your time and what works for you and what's in the best interest for you now. It's particularly difficult if you have to really ramp up your work on a seasonal basis, and so it might be quite difficult to spread your pay over a lot of months, but then you might now think, is that going to be worth it for you? So like with anything, really just think, what's best for your time and where. Okay, now the other thing I will just point out is that when it came to COVID, which just seems like so long ago now, thank goodness, a lot of arts workers fell through the gaps of the self-employed support grant and actually got a lot less in terms of their grant that wasn't reflective of their overall annual earnings. And that was because a lot of them were doing part-time PAYE work as well as their self-employed work. So if they were lucky enough to be based on their self-employed incomes, then it meant that none of the work they did on a PAYE basis, even though that was actually freelance, would be taken into account. So that's just something for you to understand there, or to have some insight into that. Right, okay, so I have a call to action for you now. I appreciate this isn't perhaps the most exciting of topics, but I think it's important that people are aware of it. I was really surprised that pretty much nobody else understood why that was the case. And so my call to action is to ask you to all do 3 things. I want you to answer 3 points. 1, do you understand this loophole? Do you understand this national insurance trap? 2, were you aware of this before? 3, would this affect your freelancer career in the past, the present, or the future? Yeah, those are the 3 points. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.